Well, I never realized I had gut issues until I went on the carnivore diet. Who would have thought that, going to the toilet 3, 4 times a day was not normal, and having these, bouts of just bloating and reflux. I thought reflux was just a normal thing. And if it got worse, I'm gonna take a PPI for it, easy peasy. But no, it when I went on carnivore, all those things, it just went away, and I thought, oh gosh, it's not really, I never realized that was an issue to begin with.
Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Meat Medic podcast. Now, today I'm joined by my very special guest, Joff Ylarde, who is a registered nurse and a fellow carnivore like myself. He's the host of the popular Revitalize Yourself channel on YouTube. As I said, he's a registered nurse, so he spends a lot of time in his career being hospital-based bedside nursing. He's seen the devastating effects that chronic disease can cause, and he's now become a huge advocate for strength and resistance training as well as carnivore diet, having been a powerlifter in the past, and he's now trying to get back into the sport being a carnivore. So I'd love to get his take on how that's going. He's been carnivore now for a couple of years, I believe, and he's had great success, including a lot of cardiovascular disease, mental health improvements, sleep apnea, and gut issues, which we'll ask him about today. And he's come on to his channel to share his story today. So thank you very much, Joff, for coming on the Meat Medic podcast today.
Thank you, Dr. Khirwadkar, for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now, maybe if you can just give my listeners a little bit of background about yourself, Joff. I mean, I've obviously introduced you there, but if you can maybe just give us, the story. How did you get into the carnivore diet? Because it's not mainstream medical advice.
No, definitely not. So it all really starts with, I guess, where I like to pinpoint the time period where I experienced the first, I guess, medical problems that would normally trigger, action. And so this happened when I was in my early 20s, and I had my first blood test. Now, the first thing that I got was a phone call from the GP clinic, and basically telling me to come in to discuss results. Now, the doctor who I had consulted had said, your cholesterol levels are high. And so we sort of started talking about, cholesterol, and then, I opened up about my family history, which, basically I'm riddled with heart disease in my family. Multiple family members have had cardiovascular disease and have also passed away from cardiovascular disease. So that kind of prompted the discussion to treatment. And so surprisingly, the first thing that this doctor had recommended was to take a statin, just due to the fact that this was, likely hereditary at the time. That's what my impressions were. And so, yep, that was the first recommendation. The second thing was you could change your lifestyle. We could look into your diet, look into your exercise, and see how we go from there to see if we can, somehow lower these markers of heart disease. And so I picked the latter. I wasn't going to go on tablets, definitely not at the tender age of 20. I was just, in my mind, I was far too young for that. So I took upon the advice. He recommended me to see a dietitian, and I went ahead and jumped straight into the bro science wagon and got into the fitness industry and got into gym. And so those were the two kind of ways I was looking at targeting, the focus of my health and how I could improve it. So I went to the gym, and I really got passionate about it. To a point where, I got into, the so-called strength sports. I got into powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting. And so I felt great. And I was more so focused on that than my diet. Although in saying that, the two aren't mutually exclusive. I was also eating a pretty considerably clean diet at that time. I was following the advice of the dietitian: eat a low carb, sorry, not low, uh, low fat diet. Moderate protein. Eat a balanced diet. And yeah, just definitely don't eat a lot of fat. And so I did that. Um, and I was getting stronger. I was looking, muscly. I was starting to feel great. I felt somewhat invincible, but at the same time, there was subtle things that I would also experience throughout my 20s. I would be getting small bouts of palpitations, shortness of breath, and I also had at times, my blood pressure was, a little bit high. Uh, but that didn't matter to me as a young 20-year-old. I was training, I was going to the gym, and I'm following advice. And it really, I guess, it really progressed towards, me getting, putting on weight. I was putting on weight that I attributed to, I'm getting stronger and more, I'm putting on more muscle. It must be muscle. And yeah, it just kept on increasing. Now my symptoms didn't get any better, and I reached the point in my towards my late 30s where I like to say it that the diet and lifestyle choices caught up to me. I started to experience these symptoms at a much more severe, I guess, level, and the frequency of how when I'd be getting these symptoms were just happening far too often. It got to a point where I was getting these symptoms on a weekly basis, and so yeah, um, it caught up to me to a point where I had to stop training. I had to stop going to the gym. I couldn't take it anymore. There wouldn't be a session where I would, feel palpitations, and it scared me. It really did. So I backed off the gym, and then I put on more weight. Uh, so just for some statistics, I'm about 165 centimeters, 5'4", and at my heaviest, I weighed 100 kilos. So it was about that obese range. And at my heaviest, I was at my most unhealthiest. I would imagine. I was in the hospital. I was doing weekly rounds to the local hospital, to the local emergency department. I've had all sorts of scans and diagnostics done, um, and yeah, and that took not just a toll on me physiologically, it took a toll on me emotionally and mentally. And I think that's probably what hit me the hardest, was just the mental health. It really, you know, um, it was at a low. I had bouts of anxiety, and I was diagnosed with a bit of depression as well. Although I never did anything to treat it, I never actively looked at that pathway. I was fixated on this, on my heart disease symptoms, and so I, as a healthcare worker, I used all the resources I could to try and find out what the hell was wrong with me, because something is not right. Um, and my searches led me to this key phrase, inflammation. And so that was the first thing I started looking at. And it was, YouTube was completely saturated with information about inflammation. I didn't know where to start, and so I listened to, of course, what the mainstream advice would tell you is, eat a plant-based diet, eat anti-inflammatory foods. Like, I was doing these turmeric lattes. I ate the Mediterranean diet. I would saturate my food with olive oil, because it was anti-inflammatory. Oh, of course, and I did that, and um, and I won't lie, it made me feel great. Uh, just to get the ball rolling. And I did lose about a kilo or two doing the Mediterranean diet. And but the thing is, I it would be yo-yo. It would be just, I couldn't sustain it. It would, I would still have these moments of putting the weight back on, the palpitations would come back. It just wasn't going away, and I started experiencing new things like joint pain, which I thought, oh God, maybe this is old age showing. I was like you. I submitted myself to, I'm going to be getting these conditions sooner or later, and it looks like I'm heading down that path anyway. But it really took a turn when one day, I woke up from a nap and my wife was next to me and she looked at me in shock. She was like, "Did you know that you stopped breathing for about 2 minutes?" And I thought, "Hang on, what?" And I'm like, "No, immediately I knew what it was. I mean, I knew that it was, that was a sign of sleep apnea. So I recorded myself, and yeah, I had sleep apnea. And that was the straw for me. I thought, nah, this is it. I've got to do something about this. And at this stage already, I'd already been introduced to the low carb space by a colleague of mine at work. He told me about sugar being inflammatory, and I thought it was crazy at first. But once I started experiencing sleep apnea, I thought, I'm going to take the plunge, because bloody hell, if I can't breathe, I'm not going to have a good quality of life. So I did that. Oh, sorry if I'm not supposed to be using those words here. So I did. Yeah, I went low carb, and immediately, started to notice the difference. I lost the weight. I pretty much, felt good about a week or two after. Now, naturally, if you're going to be Googling or YouTubing your searches on low carb, you'll come across the likes of Dr. Ken Berry, the Low Carb Down Under channel on YouTube, Dr. Sean Baker. And yeah, these people were talking about this thing called the Carnivore Diet. I thought, this is a bit of a red flag here, because I'm told that, red meat's bad for you and cholesterol is bad for you. This might not be the go. However, I couldn't deny what I was experiencing. I was already eating I was substituting, the sugary foods with, high fat foods already. I was eating, cheese, butter, dairy. I ditched the low fat milk. I was going with the full cream stuff, avocados, you name it. So maybe this isn't such a crazy idea that, red meat is a bad thing necessarily. So by the time I knew it, I started to think about what I would, what my diet actually looked like. And I thought, hang on, 3 months into low carb, I'm already eating a carnivore diet. Like, I never liked vegetables to begin with. And so technically I wouldn't miss it if I got rid of it. And so the last bit of veggies and fruits that I had in my diet, I just scrapped it. I basically discarded them away, and I stopped eating those things, and that's where it all began. And I can remember that clearly, because the conscious decision of me going carnivore was the day that my daughter was born. So I remember that day very clearly.
Wow. No, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, isn't it funny though that, we would talk about vegetables, being really good for us and so on, but isn't it funny? I often say this to people, to patients, why is it that kids don't want to eat vegetables?
Yeah. Right.
Like above everything else. And people say, oh, it's because they're naughty or whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. When you're like 5, 6, whatever, you're hopped up on sugar and stuff. I get it. Okay, fine. What about, like when you're weaning, when you're 6 months old, like you're not really hopped up on sugar. You don't know what good or bad is. You don't know naughty. You have no moral compass whatsoever. You're 6 months old, you don't know what's good and bad. Yeah. Why do 6-month-olds, they violently sometimes refuse vegetables?
Yes.
They're throwing it, they're just being naughty. It's like 6 months old, they don't know what naughty is.
No.
And they're like throwing the food against the wall, like pushing it away, shoving it away, like refusing to eat it, and it's like, well, does it mean that they're being naughty, or are they just being intuitive and instinctive
Yeah. Yeah.
to not eat the vegetables that don't taste right to them? Like, why would you eat something that doesn't taste right? Why do we even have this taste in the first place?
Right.
I just think it's a really, really fascinating point. No one can give me an explanation other than, oh, kids are just naughty.
Yeah.
Are they? Or like, is it just they're instinctive? So you pretty much just took out the vegetables. I mean, that is something I hear a lot. Well, I'm pretty much already there. Like, I'll just take that last bit out.
Yeah.
How did you find that last bit? I know what the difference it made for me.
Yeah.
What was the difference for you just taking out that last little bit? So you're basically keto almost, essentially.
Yeah, I was keto at that stage.
And then you went carnivore. What was the difference between keto and carnivore for you?
Look, to be honest, that change into carnivore wasn't the first week. I actually, and to this day, I can't pinpoint what it is, except I do have an idea. But the minute I dropped the veggies, the last bit of carbohydrates in my diet, I actually broke out in a massive rash all over my torso. And so I thought, what the hell is going on? Like, was it because I took out the veggies? And I was just itchy everywhere. And I can now, if I look at it, I was eating high oxalate ridden foods. I was telling you about the turmeric drinks. I was still doing that in my low carb, journey. And I was drinking, these turmeric teas for like two times a day, basically. And those are high oxalate foods. I was eating spinach and all those salads, which are high oxalate foods as well. And so maybe potentially it could have been about oxalate dumping. I don't know. And to be honest, I kind of just pushed through. I thought, this is, this must be just, it must be something. It could be in anything, really. It could have been a skin reaction to I don't know, anything I could have been encountered with. So, but after that week, and the rash sort of resolved, it just automatically, the weight dropped even faster. And I mean, like, it pretty much, just burned off me. I mean, not the right term to use, but it just melted away. And the biggest thing was, I think, the level of euphoria and the energy that a lot of people, say that they had. I felt like I was I felt like Superman, really. I felt like I could do anything. And that was enough for me to say, oh, this is enough motivation to keep going on. But yeah, that immediate sense of, feeling like you had enough energy to basically run a marathon even without training was just a surreal feeling. It's hard to explain until you actually do it. Because like you said when I interviewed you, you don't know these problems until you really, try this crazy diet, this heart attack diet.
Yes, I know, it's crazy. I mean, people, I think a lot of people they don't know how unhealthy they are until they are suddenly not unhealthy anymore. And then they realize it's like just this black and white, night and day, this sheet's just pulled off their eyes. And they're like, oh my God, like, is this what the world is?
Yeah.
It's absolutely, it's crazy. But I mean, it probably was oxalate dumping based on what you've said there. I mean, it's certainly, the first thing that comes, two things come to mind: keto rash and oxalate dumping. I mean, whether or not those two are actually the same thing. I mean, I've wondered if those are really the same thing, because we don't really know what keto rash actually really is.
Right.
And why people get it. There is some evidence that if you then go back and eat some carbs, it can improve.
Yeah.
And keto rash can happen at any point.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's not just when you go into keto for the first time. It typically is, but not always. I got a really bad keto rash like 6 months into carnivore, 7-8 months into carnivore. Like why, I don't know. Probably was oxalates just coming out again, and I don't know. So oxalates are confusing and difficult.
It is very difficult.
Very random what they can do and so on. But it certainly could have been oxalate dumping. Yeah, I mean, isn't that incredible though? You kind of were just, like you said, the weight just melted off you. You felt like Superman. You felt incredible, even compared to keto. And I think this is a really big point. People, I think you kind of have to see it to believe it. you just don't realize the difference it can really make.
Hmm.
You mentioned, of course, all these issues, and you'd been to this doctor. I know you said on your show you hadn't really gone back. Had you gone back to the doctor at this point, or
No,
you just hadn't seen them since?
no, haven't seen a doctor since.
Okay.
I haven't seen a doctor. Just I just felt like I haven't needed to. And I've always been a firm believer that it's quite important to listen to your intuition, and that if you feel like you've addressed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I feel like if I was, especially in the earlier, I guess, uh, months of doing carnivore or keto, I may have been swayed back into, you know, going back to the lifestyle that I once was, because, I had been following this narrative and this advice that has been given to me, you know, for pretty much since I became since I became a nurse. And it's very hard to dismiss and to just throw away all that information to say, hang on, that was wrong actually. And so anything could have swayed me. So I thought I've got to give this a go, and just try and put all my focus into this pathway that
Mm,
I've decided to take.
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you find that, being a nurse? Do you, because you're mainly, I think, in a hospital,
Yes.
seeing patients at their bedside. I'm sure, I mean, you've obviously seen the effects, devastating effects of chronic disease. I'm sure. Um, do you talk about it at all at work? Like, do you talk about it to patients at all? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. It is a challenge. I won't lie. Um, because like I said, I'm going to be, the stuff that's going to be coming out my mouth is against what, you know, people have been saying for years that we need to do to improve our health. So, eat a lot of fiber, veggies and stuff like that. I'm going to be saying to people, you shouldn't be doing that. And so it's going to be a challenge. So I basically, um, the way I get around it is I talk about my anecdotal experience. I take away my professional hat and just talk about, what I do in my personal life. And basically, point people to, hey, look, there's this really awesome YouTube channel called Low Carb Down Under. Check it out. It's not hard to, to listen to a 10-minute video. And people do. People have been doing that. So, colleagues, work colleagues, by now, a lot of them know that I'm doing this crazy diet, and they, I've received nothing but love from colleagues, and they're quite supportive of the way I've gone about this. And however, I think it will be different though if let's say I didn't have the the physical changes that they could see. Uh, because yeah, the first thing that they would see if I hadn't seen them for a while was that, oh man, you're losing weight. Are you okay? Yeah, and so and people would be just telling me how awesome I looked, and how how younger I looked. And so that really took away the crazy messaging, I guess, that people might see. And so yeah, the conversation has definitely been there ever since I started carnivore, with colleagues, patients, family, friends. It's been happening everywhere. But at work it is a challenge, because it's it's a tricky one to navigate. You don't want to, obviously, you know I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I can't give any medical advice anyway. But at the same time, you don't want to tread on anyone's professional conduct, and also your own. So I stick within the realms of my anecdote and the things that I've watched and learned through YouTube, as well as my own literature searches. Oh, that was a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, I mean, it must be hard for you, and it probably is very hard being very mindful that, yes, you can't really give medical advice. I guess that's where someone like me is a lot freer.
Yeah.
to do that. That must be very, very challenging for you to kind of walk that tightrope, probably
Mm.
knowing like, oh my God, if I could just tell them that
Yeah.
they could get better, but I can't, I'm not allowed to. That must be very, very hard for you. You mentioned, of course, like, multiple kind of health issues that you had before. I'm keen to know if those palpitations disappeared with carnivore.
Yeah, all gone. So
Gone
all
completely.
gone completely. Yeah. So
Wow.
I've not had a palpitation since uh yeah, since before carnivore. And blood pressure, I was at the 160s. So
Oh yeah.
I actually did take antihypertensive. I took a beta blocker, and I took a statin drug.
Right.
And so I did. Of course, now I don't take them anymore. I've taken myself off completely. But yeah, so blood pressure has improved, palpitations have improved. I no longer have any of those symptoms. Um, yeah, so I was never, I guess, formally diagnosed with anything. I was in the, in the midst of. I had an echocardiogram done. I've done a stress test. They did find out I had a bit of a murmur. I
Mm,
think it was a grade. No, I can't even remember what grade murmur it was. It was a very mild one, but I did have, a little bit of an arrhythmia at times. Otherwise, there was no real formal diagnosis of anything. And so
mm,
the cardiologist basically told me to just come back in a few years and see what's going on.
hmm.
But yeah, no, I haven't gone and seen a doctor for nearly 2 years.
Otherwise, yeah.
Mm.
What about the mental health? You mentioned the mental health was an issue with around anxiety, never formally diagnosed, but you did have some issues. What's happened with that now with carnivore diet?
Oh, mate. So that, once that feeling of euphoria kicked in, I felt like my mental health just all of a sudden improved. And from there, I feel like, how shall I put this? Um, I feel like I could deal with life in general in a much more calm manner. I no longer, I guess, well, I can't say I no longer, but I do have less moments of, I guess, you know, moments where I would let my emotions get the best of me. Um, I feel more able to deal with stressful situations, as you can imagine. Being a shift worker, having kids, and doing this YouTube thing, it is very, it can be stressful, but I feel like I've managed that perfectly fine. And you know I've I haven't felt any depression since the day I walked out of that GP's office and them telling me that, you've got depression. Here's you know I'll refer you to a psychologist. I haven't had any depression since. Um,
How
so
amazing is that?
yeah, crazy, right?
Just from diet, that is just incredible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think there's a number of ways that can happen. I mean, I talk to patients. I mentioned on your show, I
Mm,
talk to patients about carnivore diet with their mental health if they're wanting to. I think there's a number of ways that I've been looking further into this lately, and I think a lot of it's down to dopamine actually.
yeah.
Um, I think probably one of the biggest ways we get this dopamine excess is through our diet,
Mm,
sugary foods, processed foods, it's hyper addictive, hyper palatable foods. When you take all of those out, and I think that's still a problem on keto.
mm,
A lot of people on keto, they're still, they're doing like all these keto cheesecakes, keto ice
yeah.
creams, keto, like, and like they're actually, are they just feeding that kind of dopamine, addiction that they
Yeah.
need? When you reduce that dopamine addiction, you reduce that dopamine tolerance. People call dopamine the happy hormone. I mean, I think a better terminology is the chemical of want and desire.
Yeah.
I think that's a much bigger,
Mm,
much better wording for it. And when you get that reduction of dopamine and the dopamine tolerance falls, the threshold also falls with that.
mm.
And so smaller things in life can make you happy. And then you're happy more of the time because more things are making you happy.
Yeah, that makes
And I think
sense.
that actually goes a big way. And there's other neurotransmitters like insulin. Insulin is involved in serotonin production. More tryptophan in the diet obviously usually equals more serotonin as well. Noradrenaline, things like that we know can affect mental health. So I think it's multifactorial.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think dopamine certainly is a big aspect. I think that's also an issue with probably why we see things like addictions actually reduce down.
Yeah. Yeah,
as well. Sugar addiction, especially, but yeah, gaming addiction, porn addiction, alcohol, smoking, all these kinds of things can often reduce as well. I suspect that's probably, dopamine. It's just amazing, it's amazing how much diet can influence these things. It really is.
definitely.
It
Yeah.
really is. Did you notice that? Did you have any issues with like sugar addiction before?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you can see by my complexion and the way I look, I come from an Asian background. And
Mm,
basically, the whole staple diet for the continent of Asia is rice. So, um, you could say that that is what I was born eating. And so I was a carb addict since since birth,
yeah.
really.
How have you found that? Because I mean, culturally, I have had some patients culturally they want to do carnivore, but yeah, they're culturally finding it quite hard because their diet is predominantly, just carbs. They go to family events and it's just, have all the rice and the rotis and naans and whatever and like
Yeah.
all these sweets and stuff. Like that's just in and Southeast Asian noodles and rice and all this kind of stuff. Like how did you find that?
It was at first, I think it was more of a mental challenge that I had to overcome because, um, well, the first time I went out in public and, saw people in a social setting, they could see I'd lost weight. And so naturally they would ask what I'd be eating. And, I'd tell them about keto, carnivore. And that wasn't the shock factor. The shock factor was when I mentioned I don't eat rice, people are, oh my God,
What's going
what's
on?
going on? And
You've abandoned your culture.
yeah, well, that's exactly how I felt. I felt like
Yeah.
it was a bit shameful to even utter those words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And so for a long period of time, I thought, could I sustain this? I'm quite, um, I wouldn't say I'm social in socially always out there, but I do go out to social events, and I have to interact with people, and I just I hated that feeling of shame and I guess insecurity that I was losing my identity. But really, as time went on, and I was just losing the weight. I was feeling better. I was getting more energized. Uh, People stopped, commenting on that, and really just were more focused on looking at the positives. Like, man, you're doing so well with losing weight. You kind of forget about that conversation about rice, and so it really yeah, it just naturally just I couldn't care less anymore. It didn't make a difference because at the end of the day, I realized that people really don't care what you eat. They really don't. They might make comments here and there, but it's more of a shock, especially if you're doing something considered to be extreme, like cutting out all foods but meat, salt, and water. And so I had to just look at my own journey and the things that I was experiencing, and that outweighed that feeling of that social barrier of being attached to this certain food.
Yeah. That's maybe a good time to talk about what do you actually eat on the carnivore diet? Because I mean, the carnivore can mean so many
Yeah,
different things to different people. And we touched on this a little bit on your show. What are you actually eating on carnivore diet?
look, so it does fluctuate. I could say probably in the span of you know nearly 2 years, I've been mostly strict carnivore, um, with the exception of coffee. And so I would probably say my diet consists of meat, animal fat, salt, and water. Occasionally I will have dairy. I would have eggs, but my diet is mostly ruminant meat.
Mhm.
So, it, with that being said, I'm not claiming to be perfect at this. I live in the same generation and era that everyone else does right now. There's temptations out there that I just simply cannot always stick to this regimen of eating. You know, for example, just being out in public, if I'm hungry and in my you know my instincts tell me I need to eat something, I'm going
Mhm.
to eat as close as I can to a carnivore diet. But if it's not if it's not at reach for me, I'll go for the next best thing.
Hmm.
I will still, there might be, it might be a burger, it might be a salad, it might be,
Hmm.
it might be anything. I'll have to go for it. But that's only happened, on rare occasions. Um, but yeah, that is. But I like to stick to mainly a 100% carnivore diet if I can. I've recently, so I did cut out coffee for a few months earlier this year, about 2 months. So I could say for the 2 months, that duration, I was completely 100% carnivore. But I have introduced coffee back in because I wanted to, and I feel like
Mm.
it wouldn't do me damage, so I did. But in saying that, I also, I've cut back on the amount of coffee I was consuming. I was, 5 to 6 coffees a day, down to
Mm.
a half strength coffee, maybe every second day.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point that, things like coffee, people get really anal about,
Yeah,
like if you go into like internet groups and stuff,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, you're not carnivore. You're like, you're,
yeah,
you're eating coffee, like you're drinking coffee. You're not carnivore. That's a plant. You're like, dude, come on, like live a little,
yeah,
like it's okay to do this every once in a while. You ask like any of they're like the big people out there, Dr. Chafee, Dr. Baker, Dr. Berry, all these people out, they'll tell you all the same thing. Like, fine, like if you want to drink coffee, go drink coffee.
yeah,
Like it's absolutely fine. I've just had my fourth child. Like I've introduced coffee back into my diet.
yeah, yeah,
It's useful at times, like,
yeah.
and it's that thing. I think when you go carnivore, people don't really realize this until they do it. You become so much more aware of what food does to you
Yes, yes.
that straight away if it causes you a problem.
Right, right.
Like I know now with nuts, like I just can't eat any nuts because things like avocado, like kiwi, like even fruit, like I can eat these things now and not have a big issue with them. Like literally like one peanut and it's my tummy's just like,
Yeah.
like I like this an almond or like a cashew or like any nut basically. Like my stomach just does not like it
Yeah, yeah,
straight away. So I know I just don't eat nuts. Like it's
yeah,
fine. But I think, you're right there. I think if you're really hungry, you're desperate for food. Yes, you can fast and you won't die, but also like, do we really need to? I'm not convinced we have to be 100%,
mm.
all the time. I'm keen to know how the kind of the powerlifting is going because you said you used to do powerlifting. You're trying to get back into that, and of course, one of the things that we're commonly told, this whole bro science out there is like you must eat carbs for exercise.
Yeah,
Carbs fuel the body, especially something like
mm.
powerlifting that is really that kind of explosive, energy.
Yeah.
How do you find that without the carbs now on carnivore?
Well, so much better, and in so many ways, I can't even you
Interesting.
know you know get into all of it now. But the I guess the main thing was when I first, so I had stopped training, or had even touched the barbell for about 2 or 3 years, I think it was, and I only spur of the moment decided that I wanted to get back into powerlifting after feeling so great on carnivore. It was about a year into it. I thought, man, wouldn't it be amazing just to get back into the barbell again and just get build some muscle. And so I did it as an experiment to see how it would go. um I was nervous at first, thinking that I'm going to be zapped out of energy in that the first few sessions, because I'm not going to be I haven't been eating carbs, and I just didn't know how it would pan out. And so, to my surprise, I felt great, man. After the first week, I'm like, yeah, I felt the pain. I felt, the normal, the DOMs, the muscle aches. But in terms of energy and getting up the next day, I was straight back into it. I just, after the session, go home, wake up, go about my day without having a bat and bite to see what has actually changed. And so, yeah, it's definitely achievable. And so in the last over 6 months now, I've basically I'm close to the stage where I was lifting the same weights that I was 3 or 4 years ago now. And so I definitely feel like I'm a lot stronger relative to the body weight that I was. So happy to say, and happy to say that I'm much stronger than I ever was, even when I was eating carbohydrates. I wouldn't be. I used to, you know, uh, you know, indulge myself in these pre-workout meals. I'd carb load before a big session. During my session, I'd be guzzling down, you know, stimulants, sugar, electrolytes, and whatnot. And now, this is my pre-workout. I wake up, I go to the gym, I have a sip of water, done.
Yeah.
That's
It's
that.
it's exhausting doing all that stuff though, isn't it? I mean, I
Yeah,
used to do that at like 5 a.m. and I'd be making my shakes,
yeah,
my pre-shake, my
yeah,
intra shake, my post shake. I'd go to the gym with like 3 shakes,
yeah,
banana and the maltodextrin.
yeah,
Like I was making it in the like changing room, and it's just like, oh my God, like it exhausts me even thinking about that stuff now. And
yeah,
now it's like, what do you do? Like, I just work out.
yeah. I just work out.
I just
I
lift some
just
weights.
do
I do
it.
like 10 push-ups. I just do it. And like I build muscle and it's easy and it's
Yeah,
great. It's like, it's so nice. And there's almost no recovery time as well.
yeah,
Carnivore, like you're just pumping so much amino acids and protein into you. It's so good.
yeah,
I'm keen to ask you about your gut issues. You
yeah.
mentioned that you had gut issues, and that is something that we do very, very often see resolve on Carnivore as well. I wonder if you can just, talk about that a little bit.
Well, I never realized I had gut issues until I went on the carnivore diet. Who would have thought that going to the toilet 3-4 times a day was not normal, and having these bouts of just bloating and reflux. I thought reflux was just a normal thing. And if it got worse, I'm gonna take a PPI for it, easy peasy. But no, it when I went on carnivore, all those things, it just went away, and I thought, oh gosh, it's not really, I never realized that was an issue to begin with. And you know, I don't know whose idea it was to correlate, um, you know, the amount of times you go to the toilet with good bowel function. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you think about it now, like you're meant, your system, your gastrointestinal system is supposed to be for nutrient absorption. Why are we emphasizing on the amount of poos we're doing a day?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes from the idea this, oh well, it's toxic, it's waste, it should
Yeah,
come out and whatever. But it's also, I mean, based on these incredibly weak, epidemiological studies,
yeah,
showing these, tribes in Africa or whatever. Just I can't remember the exact research, but it's, it's along those lines. Well, these people poo like 20 times a day. They have gigantic poos. All they eat is plants, and they don't get bowel cancer. So that's what we need to do. Completely disregarding that they don't smoke, they don't
yeah,
drink alcohol,
yeah,
they don't, they exercise, they don't eat processed foods and seed oils and all these chemicals and sugar and all this other stuff. They're eating an incredibly whole food clean diet.
yeah,
And that's why they're not getting bowel cancer.
yeah,
It's not the fact that they're doing the turds the size of dinosaurs. I just got that image of Jurassic Park in my head now with Jeff Goldblum. And like just like, wow, that's a big pile of shit. And and this is where it all kind of came from. But it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was the same actually. Just didn't really kind of know that these were issues until
yeah,
they went away. And how sad is that though? How sad is that? That even as medical professionals, we don't really even know that our guts are a problem.
yeah. Right?
Like
Yeah.
how crazy is that?
It's crazy.
And it's all from the food that we're eating, and we've just completely normalized this kind of behavior of just, yeah, it's pretty normal to go to the toilet like 4 times a day.
Yeah.
Like, why is that normal?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, why is it normal to get heartburn? Why is it normal to get bloating and so on, all these things? And the medical profession, unfortunately, it does kind of continue that idea that, oh, these are just normal.
Yeah. Well, there's a tablet for it. You'll resolve it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry, like just go and take a tablet. If you get cramps, go take a tablet. If you get constipated, take a tablet.
Yeah.
If you get diarrhea, take a tablet. Heartburn, take a tablet, like you said. And that's kind of sad, really, that we're in that space. But I think the more people that do experience the carnivore diet that goes without these issues, suddenly they realize, wow, maybe life isn't actually like that.
Yeah.
and then they tell their patients. I think then word does get around eventually. Word
Yeah.
will get around that actually we don't have to have those issues, which would be nice, of course. I'm conscious of time,
Yeah.
and it's been really great talking to you today, Joff. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't really spoken about today?
No, not really. I guess, it's, if there's anything that I want to get out in, in sort of any videos that I am able to do is just, we're not here to try, and I speak on my behalf, but I'm not here to try and give advice and force anything upon anyone. Okay. And I've never had that mindset even before the carnivore diet. But especially with this, way of eating that, I've come across, I have had so many, changes in my life in a positive way that I feel obliged to just share this message out to people. And it's but I don't want it to get into people's mindset, you have to do as you're told. I think, the purpose of why I do what I do in social media is for people to, to listen to my story, my anecdotes, other people's stories, their anecdotes, and also just shed light on the actual scientific evidence we have out there that, you know, we should be considering. Because, otherwise, if we continue to put faith in the current mainstream advice, uh, who knows what would happen, and how things would turn up in the next 40, 50 years. And the way I look at it is this, um, people can already see how stretched out the healthcare system is globally. All right. It's crazy. People always talk about the shortages of hospital staff, like nurses and doctors and whatnot. Um, it's only like that because we haven't found the solution to, you know how the hell do we reverse and cure diabetes? How do we stop people from getting heart attacks and strokes? And how do we stop people from getting obese? We're only seeing this because it's, unfortunately, that's just the burden of healthcare. This is we have to see these things, and it puts a lot of stress on people like yourself and myself, who are in the front lines of this. And so, yeah, if I can somehow help someone not end up in hospital, I think I have a bit of satisfaction in continuing to do what I do on social media. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to see any of you guys in my ward. So, and I mean that in a good way.
And how can people find you on social media and your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so I go under the handle revitalize underscore yourself, and that's revitalize with an S. So I'm both on YouTube and on Instagram. And so, yeah, you can find me there. I have some videos. I've done interviews. I did one just with you before, Dr. Khirwadkar. And yeah, those are pretty much all my socials.
Yeah, no, perfect. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, everyone should, go follow Joff on the revitalize underscore yourself on YouTube. He's got a number of videos on there. I'm just having a quick look at them now. Lots of interviews. So I'm sure they're very, very good. So go check him out. Follow him on Instagram again. Same handle on revitalize underscore yourself.
Yes, correct.
And follow him along with his journey there as well. I think you're absolutely right. And it's a war, basically. Between health and poor health, and we're losing the war. And as you said, you just have to look at the costs of health insurance and people's own pockets. More and more and more money is being spent, more and more drugs being taken all the time, and yet we are losing this battle. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know there's something that's not right. With people's health, and we don't have what the answer. I mean, the answer is do something different. What we're doing isn't working. And of course yourself, many people out there do believe that really diet is the number one key here. Because if you look at what's changed over the last 100 years or so, it's the diet.
100%.
That's what's changed. The amount of physical activity and so on, it has gone down slightly, but not that much on the whole. It's the diet that's made the difference really for everyone. So diet really is the important thing here.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, really, you're doing what you can.
Yeah.
And I think, you're doing the best thing that everyone should do is just being out there, just talking to people, saying, look, I'm doing this, do it if you like, fine. But, I'm doing this and I'm seeing benefits. You could too, if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think it's people like yourself that really actually are the key to all of this. It's the groundswell, this movement that we need from people to one person tells the other person, tells the other person, that's what we need. Because it's never going to come from government or drug companies. Like, what drug company is going to say, you know what, actually, guys, you don't need to take our drugs anymore.
No, that's right. No.
You just go on this carnivore diet. It's great. You don't need our drugs,
Yeah.
What company is going to say that?
No.
Never. Sugar companies are never going to say, don't eat our sugar anymore. Don't buy our food. It's bad for you. No, they're going to go and pay Ansel Keys, another whatever millions of dollars to discredit cholesterol again, So it's never going to come from centralized government. It's never going to come from drug companies. It's never going to come from really the medical profession, I think, as a whole.
Yeah.
It's got to come from the ground, from people like yourself, just saying, hey, look, I'm doing this, and I'm seeing results. Do you want to try it as well?
Yeah.
I think that really is the best thing. Yeah.
And I'm fortunate too, because I've had, only a handful of people in my personal life that I know who have actually tried the carnivore diet. And, even that has been a great start to, getting awareness out there, because it starts with that one person who tries it, and then they spread it out to their friends and family. And it does, word does spread pretty quick.
It does. Absolutely. Like I said, I am conscious of time. I know my wife is on the way back with the kids. She's been keeping them at the park. Very, very good. She's an absolute angel, hero. She's got four kids down at the park. So I could do this podcast in peace. So I'll be sure to make her a nice carnivore dinner tonight.
Oh, that's
so yeah, she's hopefully actually going to come on the podcast soon. She's agreed to come on because she did a what most people would call animal-based diet through pregnancy,
right.
Which I wasn't super vocal about, but now that she's happy for you to kind of talk about it, so it completely goes against the norms, for pregnancy, and it's really interesting. She actually had the best pregnancy that she's had of all four.
Interesting.
5 pregnancies. We've actually had a miscarriage as well, unfortunately. But very interesting that she had the best pregnancy of all of them, following essentially a animal-based, mostly carnivore diet. And she's actually pretty much about to go almost full carnivore.
Wow.
Now, because our youngest child, now 5 weeks old, Noah, he is developing some sort of like cow's milk intolerance or something.
Right.
Like, we've cut out cow's milk and it's not really working. So we've cut out soy, that's not working. So we're just going to cut out wheat. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to go basically carnivore and cut out everything because she's breastfeeding and see what happens. So she's going to come on the show at some point to talk about that, which will be really cool. To it.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a really good point of view from her. So
yeah,
but she's an absolute angel, looking after the kids while I can do this podcast. So thank you very much, Joff. I'm rambling a little bit. That probably means it's time to go. Thank you so much. Apologize if anyone can hear sirens in the background. I'm right next to a main road. Hopefully the noise cancellation is working. Thank you so much, Joff, for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it and giving us your perspective. Everyone out there, make sure you follow Joff on revitalize_yourself on Instagram and YouTube. Definitely check out his channel and all the interviews he's got on there. Just having a look at them. There's a couple of really good ex-vegan ones I want to go and watch. I haven't seen those. I want to go and watch those. So make sure you check out his channel, guys. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. My wife's just told me she's coming back now.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. Definitely check out my website, themeatmedic.com, for health courses and merchandise, of course, like you can see, like my cool t-shirt here. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.